Hello everyone, Pizlinsky here. In this video I've been playing around with the liquid effect again, exploring some variations and creating some pretty sleek animations. So let's jump in and see what came out of it. To start things off, I designed a UI in Figma. It's a fictional UI for a fintech app that includes a chart and a few transactions. It's more than enough for the purposes of this video. Next, as usual, I created a new composition. Inside it, I added a shape layer, created a rectangle, gave it a feel, rounded the corners, and jumped into the animation. The animation itself is pretty straightforward. I'm animating the size and position properties. I'm also adding some extra keyframes to create a subtle bounce effect. Then I head into the graph editor and tweak the curves in the speed graph to smooth out the motion. After that, I animate the button returning to original state, using additional keyframes to keep that bounce. Now it's time to add the liquid glass effect. I duplicate the layer and rename each one: main, displacement, and light. I hide the light layer and go to the displacement one. Here I apply the inner glow effect, set the blend mode to normal, opacity to 100, pick a black color, and set the size to 40. Then I hide this layer and move over to the main layer. I apply an adjustment layer, then add displacement map effect. In the displacement map settings, I change the source to the displacement layer and set it to effects and masks. I also set the horizontal and vertical displacement to -10. After that, I add the CC glass effect, again setting the source to the displacement layer with the effects and masks enabled. I set the height to 15. In the light section, I zero everything out, and under shading, I set ambient to 105 and diffuse to 0. Moving on to the light layer, I apply the CC light sweep effect. I place it in the center of the layer and drop the sweep intensity down to remove the central line and keep just the glow on the edges. Then I fine-tune the settings to get the look I want. I also duplicate the effect and change the angle so that I have light on both sides. To make this all blend properly, I change the layer mode to screen. Now I bring in my pre-made icon assets into the timeline and start animating them. As you can see, the liquid glass effect is already working. It's important to set the track matte on the displacement layer, so the icons only appear within the main layer. Also make sure the icons are placed under the main layer so that the distortion effect applies to them. I animate them just like the main layer, adding keyframes for position and scale. I also add a Gaussian blur effect to the icons and animate that over time as well. Of course, I also create a reverse animation for them, just like I did with the main layer. Then I bring in the plus icon and animate it too, animating position, opacity, and Gaussian blur. And like the others, I add the reverse animation. I also tweak the timing a bit so the plus icon fades out more smoothly by adjusting its position keyframes. To wrap things up, I duplicate the main layer and name it blur. It's crucial to place this layer underneath the icons so the blur doesn't affect them. I set keyframes for the blur animation at the beginning, and in the CC glass effect I slightly reduce the ambient value to 102.5 to darken the background just a bit. Finally, I adjust the animation on the light layer to make sure the edge highlights match the shape change properly. Now I want to create the same kind of effect, but this time for a bottom sheet animation. I've created a new composition and added the UI image. Just like before, I add the shape layer and animate it right away, so I can reuse that animation across other layers. Then I duplicate this layer to create the displacement and light layers, and apply the same setup to achieve that liquid look. The only difference here is that I'm skipping the displacement map effect. For this animation, CC glass alone will do the job. Since the rectangle is much larger than in the previous example, I use different values for CC glass, but the basic logic stays exactly the same. At the end, I only add a single instance of CC light sweep, which is enough in this case. There's one small difference though. In this liquid glass setup, I changed the surface setting in CC glass to alpha. This gives me a stronger distortion effect. I also added Gaussian blur to help UI elements that I'm going to place on top stand out better against the background. The last step is just bringing in all the UI elements I prepared earlier. I parent them to the main layer using the Peak Whip tool so they inherit the animation. And to bring this screen to life just a little bit more, I add a simple cursor animation at the end. And now it's just a matter of wrapping things up. To prepare the final presentation, I'll place everything inside a mask as usual, and I'll be using a bezel for that. Also, I had a couple of simple position, scale and camera animations to give it some depth. And here's the final result. Well, that's pretty much it. I recently launched my Patreon, link in the description. That's why I'm sharing source files of the animations. I'd really appreciate your support there. Drop a comment what you think. Thanks so much for watching and see you in next videos. Cheers!